People are saying, well, fire suppression has allowed fuels to build up, and that's contributing to these large fires. There are several things to look at. One, the whole middle of the last century was actually wetter and cooler than it is now because the climate change is warming things up. And there were very few fires, and they didn't spread far. And so if it's wet, you don't get ignitions. And then even if you do get ignition, it doesn't burn much. And in fact, glaciers were growing in the Pacific Northwest during that time. People that want to say fire suppression was effective point to that time period, basically from the late 1930s through about 1980s, when the Yellowstone fires were sort of the first big one that we had. Now they say, well, we were successful at putting out fires, and that was led to fuel buildup. No, nature was good at putting out fires. And prior to that, in the early part of the century, we had huge fires. There was a 1910 burn that burned across northern Idaho and Montana. It burned over 3 to 3.5 million acres. We haven't had a fire that big at all in this later part of the century, early 21st century. In some years, through the late 20s and early 30s, i.e. Dust Bowl days, we had as much as 50 million acres burning across the West. 50 million acres. Today, if 10 million acres burn in a whole summer, that's considered a record summer. So there's a lack of context in these assertions about fire suppression effectiveness. But what we have seen is as the climate has warmed, we've been getting droughts that haven't been recorded in 1,000 years. And people are saying, oh, it's all this fuel buildup. And I'm like, do you think maybe 1,000-year drought doesn't have something to do with the fact that we're having bigger fires? You know, the climate influence is totally discounted by a lot of these folks. Due to our continued putting carbon in the atmosphere, we're getting warmer and warmer summers too, besides having drought. So 2024 just came out a couple of days ago, was the warmest year globally on record in recent times.